Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me for Conversations with Alan. I'm Alan Locker, the child of two Holocaust survivors. I created this series to foster honest discussions about the rise of anti-Semitism and hate, with the hope of sparking conversations that encourage us all to reflect on our role in shaping history. My goal is to inspire collective action to eradicate hate in all its forms. These conversations are even more crucial than ever as anti-Semitism continues to rise around the world. Tonight, I'm honored to welcome Robert Desmond, a British-born software developer whose passions for cycling, history, and Holocaust education led to an extraordinary journey. In October 2013, Robert embarked on a 25-day solo bike ride from London to Auschwitz, retracing the path of World War II liberation sites to honor the past and keep its lessons alive. The life-changing ride inspired the creation of Ride for the Living, a global initiative that connects history, resilience, and hope through a symbolic ride from Auschwitz to Krakow. During this journey, Robert developed a profound friendship with Marcel Zielinski, who as a young child of 10 walked 60 miles alone and afraid from Auschwitz-Birkenau to Krakow nearly 79 years ago. Marcel's story is a powerful reminder of the journey from darkness to light, from leaving Auschwitz scared and alone to the celebration of Jewish life's rebirth in Krakow today. Marcel's inspiring story and their friendship is now the focus of the powerful new documentary For the Living, which follows Robert and Marcel's journey. The film will be shown next week at the Miami Jewish Film Festival on Wednesday, January 15th at 8 p.m. at Oath Cinema South Beach. Joining us now from Poland, please welcome Robert Desmond to Conversations with Alan. Hey, Robert.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that was a great summary. That was
Okay,
really good.
Good. Well, after seeing the film and speaking to the film's directors, Mark Bennett and Tim Roper, I wanted to meet you. I love the creation of this ride. And as I mentioned backstage, I have, personally ridden many rides, 275 to 500 miles for AIDS when I was a bit younger. But what you're doing, I think, is truly inspiring. I'd love to start really with your passion for history and the Holocaust. Where did that first begin?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I didn't really develop it until I actually went to Auschwitz for the first time. So in my upbringing, we kind of knew about the Holocaust. We were taught it in school, and obviously we sort of spoke about it a bit in our family, but you never really understood what had happened. It was only when I must have been about 20 or 21 that I went on a trip to Auschwitz, and I was actually dedicating like a whole day to go around a tour there and actually stand in the camp, where I realized, oh, I did not understand this at all. Like just the facts or the number 6 million, which you learn at school, that doesn't encompass the true evil that happened here. And like, this really happened, and it didn't happen so far away from my comfy life in North London. And it didn't actually happen that long ago as well. I think that was when I sort of got hooked, as they say, and wanted to learn more, and then also wanted to tell other people. That was really what came out of it, because I had this very profound experience, and I wanted to share that with other people. And I would go back and tell people, hey, you should go and visit. And lots of people, you don't want to go and be depressed. It sounds like a tough experience. But yeah, it was that first trip when I actually was standing in Auschwitz that got me.
What led you there on that first trip?
It was really serendipity. So a friend of mine happened to be going on a trip, or he just got back from a trip, and I said, oh, that sounds really interesting. And he's like, oh, there's another trip, let me get you signed up. And that's, yeah, it just happened through a random conversation.
Could you have imagined you went there, I guess, with one idea and left with a completely different understanding of what transpired there.
So now, since that trip, I've gone back many times, and even taken groups in with March of the Living for the UK delegation, and also friends and families. And one of the things that always happens is when you're touring, there's always something little that makes you question. It develops more questions, and so you almost, once you unearth something, you're like, wait, how did that happen? How did people let this happen? What happened to that person? What happened to that group of people from this country? Oh wow, there's like a thread of what happened to the Hungarian Jews, and suddenly there's more questions every time that you go and visit. It becomes overwhelming, as I'm sure you know.
Well, the fact that you just said you take many different people in groups, I'm going to make it a point that at some point you take me.
That would be fantastic to have you to show you around.
Yeah. I definitely feel that need to see it up close for not really grasping the full scope of what my parents had experienced, and losing family there, not at Auschwitz, but at different camps per se. Before you set out on your 25-day solo bike ride, you took a roots trip with your dad to Poland. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so we actually sort of combined it. So my father's family, that side, are from what is now Ukraine, which was Russia. And we stopped on the way and did the Auschwitz trip on that first trip. So sort of like, if we're going to go there, we might as well sort of do all these things together. And it was very sort of humbling to realize that, again, like luck and serendipity of deciding, hey, let's get out of here and let's go. And fortunately, they went west as opposed to east. And it was, we owe a lot to that side of that family that decided to get out, and other sides is Lithuania, and everyone moved before the war, fortunately for my family. I couldn't imagine. It's such a different life in rural Ukraine than North London.
Yeah, definitely. Is it that trip that led you to do the ride from London to Auschwitz?
Pretty much. That was definitely the seed. It was, again, this trying to convince people, hey, you should really go and learn about this more, because I kind of knew about it, but I didn't really understand. And I'm sure there's other people. I remember one particular instance at university where I would go to Friday night dinners at the Jewish Society, and I was just on my way to go, and a friend of mine says, oh, do you want to come out for a drink with us? And I said, no, I'm going to the Jewish Society for Friday night. And they said, oh, you're Jewish? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not outwardly, that's not the first thing that I say to people. And I remember she made a comment that was like, but you're so nice. And this sort of level of underlying anti-Semitism that just is in society made me realize that, okay, if I didn't understand what happened in the Holocaust, I didn't fully comprehend what happened.
As a Jewish person
with family who came from this part of the world, how is my friend who hasn't met a Jew before, didn't realize she'd met a Jew, how is she meant to connect to this and learn? And I almost made it sort of a mission to come back and tell as many people as I could, to try and educate as much as I could.
I mean, that is really surprising, I guess, to me, astounding to me that was roughly 2012, that question, how she phrased that,
to
you came out of her mouth. Kind of shocking, really.
Well, many worse things have happened since, even. So
yes, 100%. But it still. It still astounds me. How did that ride and doing it solo change you?
It actually changed me in several ways. I'd say the first thing is every day at the end of the day, I would write a sort of blog post about where I'd been and what I'd learned, and whether it was the beaches of Normandy or the Palace of Versailles or sort of the American Cemetery in Luxembourg, or even some camps like Flossenburg or Auschwitz or Theresienstadt. I would kind of reflect and share that experience. And what I found that if I wrote a relatively short blog post, a lot of my friends would actually read that. And there was almost like this, oh, what's Robert up to? What's he doing? And you could almost sneak in some education. And that made me have this realization that, it's not necessarily that people don't want to learn, it's that they're scared of this big, scary sort of Holocaust genocide topic. But if you can wedge in like a hook to get them interested in it, which I guess is the genesis for the ride as well, right? Like the ride is the hook to get you to go and sort of have the uplifting, exciting, fun experience while also commemorating what happened.
Does that blog still live online?
You know what? I actually took it down, or it went down earlier this year. But I am hoping to put it back up. I actually made a book out of all of the blog posts.
Oh, wow.
Which I have in the other room. I should have brought it here. But yeah.
I mean, because I was going to say, happy to put the link up if it was up for people to read. At the end of the ride, you reconnected with the Krakow JCC, where you had gone for Shabbat dinner with your now wife. And that is where you and the JCC's executive director, Jonathan Ornstein, came up with the ride. Can you sort of describe the conversation and how the genesis of it?
Yeah, so I finished the ride from London to Auschwitz. I finished on a Wednesday, I think. And then on the Friday, my wife and I went to the Jewish Community Center for Friday night dinner. And it was there that we met young members of the congregation, as well as older members who were Holocaust survivors who had somehow stayed in Krakow or stayed in Poland and were now in Krakow. And they were part of this community that was new because there hadn't been anything under the Soviet occupation. And they were now allowed to be Jewish, be like outwardly Jewish. And it was just so moving to me. I became sort of fascinated with and enamored by the whole community there. And very good friends with Jonathan and Justin and Rabbi Avi. And we were sitting around one day and I say Jonathan came up with the idea, but he says that I did, but this idea that the ride should not end in Auschwitz. The story of the Jewish people doesn't end there. It continues, we have life today and we have to continue to live. And that's what the JCC is. We're not forgetting about the past, definitely not, but we also have to bring back sort of a focus on today. And he said, what if we continued the ride from Auschwitz to the JCC and then we put two and two together slowly, and that first year we actually decided we would raise money for the Holocaust survivors to go on a trip to Israel, many of whom hadn't traveled abroad before. And there were 15 of us, and we raised about $40,000, and it was a very special, it was a very special first ride.
Wow. And this was you on the first ride, correct?
That was when I just arrived after those 25 days.
Wow. From London to Auschwitz.
Yes. Yeah.
Incredible. An incredible journey. How long have you now been living in Poland?
So I have been here basically pretty much non-stop since that ride. We did go back to London for a few years, but now, I've been here basically 12, 13 years, I think.
Wow. And what is Jewish life? How would you describe Jewish life there?
So Jewish life is small. It's definitely not what it once was, but it's powerful, right? It's particularly with, I mentioned the JCC community in Krakow, the Holocaust survivors were able to sing sort of Yiddish songs that weren't sung in that community for 70 years. And to hear those tunes and to hear sort of many of the survivors remember these songs and repeat them is something very powerful that's so close to Auschwitz.
Wow. Did you grow up religious in London?
I grew up I grew up in liberal Judaism, which I think is referred to as Reform in America, maybe.
Okay.
So I'm Jewish, as they say. I don't keep kosher, but I'm very fond of the community, and I'm very fond of discussing teachings and yeah.
Yeah, I would probably, consider myself similar. I have always wished I learned more. I think, I told you backstage, not growing up in a Jewish community, or, most of my friends went to church. I think it made me miss out on embracing it more. And I try to do so a little more, this day. And without my parents living, sort of this is a way to, by doing this show is a way to honor them as well. The first ride took place for Ride for the Living in 2014. What do you remember about the inaugural ride and finishing that, like coming to?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience, because I brought a few of my friends from London came over. My now wife did the ride with us, and our friends from Krakow too. And it was this intimate little sort of, there was no organization. We had a rough route that was planned out, and we just kind of did it. And it was very powerful firstly to get other friends of mine to go to Auschwitz to do the tour. Like that was my original motivation, right? As I mentioned, I wanted to get people to go and visit. So that was very meaningful to me, that people went and they did the education piece.
Were they a mix of Jews and non-Jews?
They were actually, yes. Yes, they were.
I was curious, because that's...
Yeah.
It's great to be able to introduce both.
100%. In fact, I think the film talks about this as well. I mean, the film does this extremely well, is that it's not just this isn't a Jewish tragedy only, it's a human tragedy, and it's not the only human tragedy of genocide that we've experienced. So if anything, it's almost more important to get those who don't have that Jewish connection to go and be educated about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, correct. It is not the only genocide in the world. I mean, I felt sort of even more connected to what my parents lived through when the Ukraine war began, because you and I could watch that unfold before our eyes, where, video footage of World War II is not, wasn't as prevalent as, how we have access today to those things. Ride for the Living combines the Holocaust education and the 60-mile ride. And with the rise of anti-Semitism, the education really is such an important element. Will you talk about how that is brought in to the ride?
Yeah, so the ride itself is not just a one-day ride. There's actually like a full program for several days. There is a full day tour of Auschwitz, Auschwitz I and Birkenau as well. And we have several survivors. You mentioned Marcel Zielinski. He has been attending and is a witness who was actually in Auschwitz. Bernard often is also another Holocaust survivor who joins us. And it's extremely powerful to be standing in Auschwitz when you're with a survivor who I visited with many survivors, and there's many moments that stand out, but One in particular is when you're standing with Marcel and he remembers the spot where he last saw his father in the camp. The personal story, the personal connection makes it so much more like powerful and real that you just can't get from reading a book or just hearing or reading a history book. So yeah, the full day tour gives you an opportunity to learn what happened and to learn more and to ask questions and also to reflect and sort of pay your respects at the monument they have there as well. And we say Kaddish. And then the following day we do the ride, which is an early start, and we leave from the gates of Birkenau. And it's quite, I mean, maybe you have pictures of it, but it's quite a sight to see several hundred people now who do the ride each year, standing together and sort of doing this as a unity, as a way of commemorating, but also celebrating life today.
Yeah, I can't imagine, you know, having done the rides that I have and having that behind me, that's a whole other element. The impact.
It's extremely powerful, and it's very, quite often it's very overwhelming. You're sort of realizing that especially when the weather's nice in June and you're half an hour away and you're having a great time and the sun's nice and everyone's sort of enjoying themselves. It's you have moments where you reflect back to, oh, but we just left this place that is such an evil place in human history. It's very surreal as well.
Yeah, correct, because it is a living, breathing place that has so much history behind it. And before leaving the ride in 2019, you gave a speech where you said we are here for two reasons. Would you mind sharing those again?
Sure. I actually have the exact words that I said, so I'll repeat them here.
That'd be great.
So the first reason that we're here is to commemorate and pay respects to all of the victims of the Holocaust. And that clearly goes without saying, and it's a primary reason for which we're all here. But we also have to celebrate life. We recognize how lucky we are in our lives today, and we must come back to our reality today and live our lives now.
So powerful. And this is Bernard, I think the back of Bernard,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. That famous ponytail, you can't mistake it.
I love that famous ponytail. The 10th annual ride, and I think it would be longer, but because of the pandemic, will take place in June, and people can register now. The link is down below. But people can also participate, which I found fascinating, from home in the Ride for the Living Global Challenge. Tell us about the Global Challenge.
Yeah, so this is essentially, I think we actually did it before the pandemic, but it was a way to connect to communities that couldn't make the trip all the way over to Poland. And so we have this idea of like a satellite event where you can do a spin class, or you could ride your own distance of 60 miles, or you could even just do some other physical challenge or something. I think some people do yoga. It's just a way to connect if you can't make the trip all the way to Poland.
And have you found a lot of people participating?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number of how many people have done it, but there's been many groups from all over the world.
I'm sort of so mad I didn't learn about this until meeting the directors for the living, because it's incredible, and I will be something. So what has inspired you the most, or what do you think you've learned since the rides have taken off, or even I'd be curious just if you recall some of the reactions of people who have come to do this?
I mean, what is the most, there's so many powerful moments that have happened, particularly on the ride itself, where you're either with Marcel, particularly one year I did a tandem with Marcel, and there's something unbelievably powerful about doing this with someone who was forced to do the same journey so many years ago.
As a 10-year-old boy.
As a 10-year-old boy in the depth of Polish winter, which is not fun, it was snow on the ground and not proper clothing, and no Google Maps to get you anywhere, and and he had no idea. And he was with a group of other kids, and they were trying to find family members, and he was lucky enough to find his mother several months later when he got back to Krakow. That's particularly powerful. It's also very powerful to be with other second generation, so not just survivors, but the children of survivors like yourself, who can connect to this event and to the history in an extremely powerful way, and to be doing this in sort of commemoration, that's extremely powerful. And then also to see how, we have riders from all over the world, from South America to Europe to North America to South Africa, or even Australia. There's a fair contingent from there, and we all have this shared, or a lot of people have this shared history of kind of Jewish history and coming from Eastern Europe. And for us to kind of come together and be together with our very different lives, that's something that's really almost beautiful to say, here are all these different people from different parts, but we all have this thing in common, and we're all going to dedicate some time and money and flights and everything to go and do this thing, because we all believe in it, and we all want to commemorate. So the people on the ride come on a charity ride. I'm sure it was the same with your rides.
I know, you just got me really all choked up, because it just reminded me of that, Robert. Like, some of the dearest friends in my life are from those rides today. And it hit me really hard as you just said that, but it is true. You come together and it changes you, what you have to endure too. I mean, we slept in tents and, rode through a random blizzard in summer,
Wow.
So we had a little harsh experience, but yeah, it is that community coming together for a cause.
And what's also nice about a bike ride as well is you get to meet so many different people, because I'm sure you had this on your bike rides. Like, not everyone goes at the same pace. So you stop or you ride next to someone for a couple of miles, you talk about their history, and then it just moves, and you go and talk to someone else, and you build another friendship. And it's very powerful. It's very, same as you. I've got many friends, many lifelong friends that I will be friends with forever, who I made on that ride. Yeah.
Well, speaking of one of them, Marcel Zielinski, who you met in 2015, how did Marcel get involved? What made you first of all, your friendship is such a beautiful part of the documentary. I mean, hands down, it is so special. Talk about that friendship.
Yeah, when we started it, we never expected to have a Holocaust survivor. And obviously we didn't know about Marcel before we started. It was after that first ride where we had 15 people, we said, let's do it again and open it up and try and get more people along. And I think we got a call from someone in Canada, and we were like, wow, we've reached someone in Canada. This was on the second ride when we were expecting maybe, 20 people or something. We're like, oh, we've met someone from Canada who's going to come. And turns out he's a survivor from Auschwitz, and he was a boy in Auschwitz he's also a keen cyclist, and he's gonna join the ride together to retrace his steps, which he was liberated from. And he's not only just going to do the ride with us, which is already like, wow, this is fantastic and amazing. But he's going to come with his son, and his wife is also going to join, and his son's going to join, and his granddaughters are going to ride with us too. Like, there's something that was, I immediately fell in love with Marcel before I'd even met him. He'd done I think he'd done a little newspaper article. A local paper in Montreal had interviewed him, and they made a little video of him. And I was just, before I'd even spoken to him, I knew there was this strong connection that I felt. And when we met, the first time we hugged, it was actually outside of Auschwitz on the day of the ride. I think it was the morning of the ride. And we just stood there hugging for like, it must have been 10 minutes. We'd spoken on the phone, but it was our first meeting. Yeah, there he is. That was at the end of the 2016 ride. I think that must have been the year we did a tandem together. And I said this in the documentary as well. He's like this long lost brother. And even though there's a couple of generations between us, we feel, we're kindred spirits. We both have this shared passion of cycling. Fortunately, we have this connection through Auschwitz, but this is where we are, and we want to do the ride and celebrate life today.
I mean, that, when you think of the darkness, I mean, that really is the light that comes out of that tragedy. And it also is, what is it, 75 years or so after the war when you two came together, yep. Or roughly in 70 something. Really, that's something. What was it like riding with him?
It's really interesting because the first time we rode, in fact, it was even on the tour, lots of the people, the attendees of the trip wanted to come up and ask him questions. And when you're riding with him, you want to ask him questions of like, what was it like? Tell me your story. We want to know firsthand from your experience what actually happened. And what was really interesting, and it's happened, I don't know about your parents, but many survivors didn't talk for many, many years about what had happened. And Marcel was no different. He hadn't really spoken about it. And so some survivors might have like a polished story that they've told thousands of times. And this was really one of the first times that he actually spoken about his experience. And you could see the connection that he still had, as you said, 75 years later, to that memory of his father, the last place that he saw him. It's very meaningful. It's extremely meaningful to ride with him. I have no words for it.
I can imagine. And I always knew my parents were Holocaust survivors. My mother last saw her father at a work camp, mm-hmm. and we have a picture of him at that work camp.
Wow.
But it was after Schindler's List that my sister and I convinced them to do the Shoah Foundation. And even then, I mean, they were interviewed by a stranger, basically, yeah. who comes to the house. And we learned a lot, but you could still see, and that was 1994-ish, yeah. how difficult it was for them to speak about what had happened. So long after.
This is why it's so important. I mean, especially now, there are some certainties in life, and at some point in the future, there won't be any survivors left to tell their story directly. And we are at a stage now where we have survivors who we can get testimony from still, and we should take advantage of that as as much as we can and to learn as much as we can. I don't know what's going to happen in the future when it's other educators and second generation. There's less of a direct connection, and I think it's extremely important that we continue this, exactly what you're doing, this education piece, because otherwise the world needs people like us who are going to try to get the word out, try to explain what happened so that we can try to prevent these things from happening again.
100%. You know, like I said backstage, it took me a long time. You know, I realize you and I having this conversation is because of the family who risked 11 lives for my mother and grandmother, and the other family that, you know, for my father, you know, they were helped as well. I don't know them as well. I am still very connected to the family that helped my mother and grandmother. They are still a part of my life, which is
amazing,
and will be forever their family. What have you learned through your friendship with Marcel about the impact the Holocaust had on him?
I mean, one of the most powerful things that I've seen from Marcel directly is that the trauma is never eradicated. Like you can hear it in Marcel's story, you can hear it in his voice, you can see it in his face. Like he can be transported back to those traumatic experiences that he had in Auschwitz immediately. And we always talk about sort of time heals all wounds, but it doesn't. And
no, it does not. You know, I wanted to speak up in 2017 about what both of my parents were gone in 2017, but after the Charlottesville, Virginia, I don't know if you recall that incident, and seeing for myself those visuals of the men holding tiki torches and, you know, shouting, "Jews will not replace us." It took me to a place that I know my mother knew anti-Semitism still existed when she was alive, but that was to an extreme that I think it would have sent her, you know, under the bed. I really am sort of glad she wasn't there to see that and to see where we are today, even because I don't, you know, what happened in Israel on October 7th. I can't imagine what that would have done and what it has done to other Holocaust survivors.
It's incredibly upsetting, and I personally feel very powerless a lot of the time. I think one of the only things that I actually can have control of is through sort of Holocaust education and trying to get the word out, which is why I'm so proud that this film has been made and I'm a part of it, and that it's trying to help the world become more educated about what can happen in humanity, what has happened many times over, and we need to learn from these horrible mistakes and learn that it's a very slippery slope. The themes in the documentary about this dehumanization process, and from each stage, it's very easy to get from one stage to another, and it
happens very quickly. Yeah. Well, speaking of the film, what did you think when you and Marcel were approached that they wanted to make this film? What was your first reaction?
My first reaction is, who are these crazy people who want to document our connection? But no, when I first spoke to Mark over the phone, and I think we spoke for several hours, and he really understood kind of, it's not just the ride is a great story in itself, but there's also a wider message of education that can also be told.
It's a great backdrop.
Exactly, yes. It's a hook. It's the same as getting people to come to do the education on the trip. It's like, let's go on a fun bike ride. Oh, by the way, you need to learn these things. It's and then I got to know Tim as well, and Lisa, and the whole crew, and we came up with this. I don't want to ruin things that are in the.
Yeah, definitely don't. I didn't, because I didn't want to talk about the end of the movie at all, because that's so great.
So we did some filming, and it was wonderful to sort of document our connection with me and Marcel. That's something that I'm gonna hold for the rest of my life, and be very proud to be part of. I think they've done a great job, and to go back to my original. I never expected this, but my original trip to Auschwitz, when I was standing there and thinking, wow, the whole world should learn more about this. And now, like, I've written a book, and I actually filmed my original ride, and I have this very indie movie. And these guys have taken it to a much higher level, a much more professional level, and it's fantastic that it's there. I'm very proud to be part of it.
Did you and Marcel get to watch it together?
We did. There was a premiere in Krakow last year at the ride, and yeah, we were sitting right next to him. And my wife was also 8.5 months pregnant with our third son, wow. So that was nice that we got him to see it through the belly. But we were all there. It was really, really nice, and very. I mean, there was not a dry eye in that house, I think, that night. It was the day after the ride, and everyone was already emotional and exhausted. Yeah. And then
you're no matter what, those things. Yep, at the end you're emotional. So I can't imagine watching that after, for sure. What was Marcel's reaction? Was he happy that he shared his story?
Yeah, I think he was. They captured his story in an overwhelming way that he gave the proverbial thumbs up for the way that they captured it. They told it the way that he remembered it, and I think that's extremely powerful to know that this is really accurately what happened, and that this is how he remembers it. And it's told to others in that same way.
And that's how we educate. It's the truth of the story. Marcel turned 90 last September. How's he doing?
He's doing well. He's now back in Israel with not just his son and his granddaughters, but also his great-grandchildren. He's got 3 great-grandchildren now, which is amazing. I'm not sure they're old enough to ride yet. I think they're a couple of years. The oldest is two or three maybe now. But yeah, no, it's very. He's doing okay. Obviously, Israel is a tough place to be these days. But as always, Marcel is in high spirits.
Wow.
Yeah.
That to me, I would feel like that would be a scary place in the climate it is for him. Because it must bring back some memories.
It's really interesting. He's and I found this with a lot of Holocaust survivors. They're often quite calm or forgiving or empathetic even themselves. I think they in particular have learned a lot of life, and they've experienced a lot of life. And Marcel is extremely mature, and he's very insightful about the whole thing. He's very balanced, and yeah.
Wow. You said the book. Are you releasing the book, or is it out already?
I printed a few hundred copies for myself and my friends, but I will make sure that I send you one.
You should definitely, make it available. Absolutely. Yeah. On the ride's site.
Yeah, maybe as part of especially as part of this documentary coming out, we could.
Yeah, correct. You get a lot of exposure. So for anyone watching, Robert, who might, hear 60 miles and are feeling scared or intimidated, what would you say to them to get them to join Ride for the Living?
There's lots of things I could say. I could say, don't worry, firstly, 60 miles is not a huge long way. With a bit of training, you could definitely do that. And even if you can't do the ride, you can still come and do the educational piece and maybe even ride the first 100 meters or a few miles if you like. There's a support vehicle to come and help any stragglers. It's all very well organized now, not like the first year where we got lost a few times. So it's a very powerful event, and yeah, come along to Krakow and experience Ride for the Living.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for doing this. The film For the Living has a screening next Wednesday evening at the Miami Jewish Film Festival at the O Cinema South Beach. The link is down below for both For the Ride, Ride for the Living, For the Living documentary, Ride for the Living, The Ride, and the Miami Jewish Film Festival. Such a pleasure to meet you. And you and I are going to stay in touch, because I would love to have you share your knowledge if I can ever get over there to experience it. It's so important.
Very nice to meet you, Alan. Thank you. And thank you for doing this.
Well,
I appreciate it.
I truly thank you for creating this and continuing to, speak up, because I think, there are many other Jewish individuals who are scared to speak up, truly, because of what is going on in the world. I have a Holocaust survivor in my family who's in her 90s, and she sort of gets very nervous every time I post something, and worries for me. But knowing that I would not be here without all of the other people who risked their lives, and knowing that, how far my parents came from that place, it's something I have to do. I proudly wear my chai,
Right.
So.
Yeah, 100%. We've got to do it.
We definitely do. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks, Alan. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody. Thank you to Robert Desmond for joining us from Poland today and for creating Ride for the Living. For more information on the ride, go to ridefortheliving.org. The next ride takes place June 25th through June 29th. And for more information on the documentary, please visit forthelivingmovie.com. And then don't forget, remember, if you're in Miami, the screening is on January 15th. As I leave you tonight, remember, we all have choices to make in life. Speak up, do the hard things, and let's all fight hate for good. I truly believe conversations like this can change the world around us. War is certainly not the answer. Feel free to share this episode or any of these episodes with your friends and family. And until the next conversation, please stay safe.